gonna get our hype music going? Can I make a request for hype music?
Of handling music?
How's that, guys?
Great. I guess you are handling the music.
I am handling
DJ Evelyn.
curated by Connor.
I was gonna ask what's the DJ name? Courtesy of the royalty-free playlist on Spotify. Always the best stuff in there.
All right, we have people jumping on in. Hi, Peter. Thanks for jumping on. I think we're all actually in Los Angeles. Our panelists today, they're all in Los Angeles.
Right, yeah.
Not Peter, though. Hi, Mark. You're in Texas. Peter, where are you watching from? Home. Yep. Yeah, at UberMedia, we're still in work from home mode also. Stay-at-home orders haven't actually been lifted in Los Angeles yet. We're doing a phase reopening, but they haven't officially lifted. We get to see our nice homes. Or what we make of it on webcam. The music's a little different this week because there's actually singing going on.
This was pre-recorded by me yesterday. Quick track.
Honor, I'm impressed.
Yeah, man of many talents.
Talented.
I used the same studio artist as the Tiger King guy.
Oh, high production value.
Yeah.
We have a few more minutes. We're almost at the top of the hour, so once we get to the top of the hour, we'll get started.
Some familiar faces names in the list.
Yep.
You were gone from the start, now you tear me apart. I gave you my trust, but you treated me like I couldn't see. I thought you were the one, but I know that I'll never be the girl that you need. You feel the same if you were at the back of her mind. Suddenly the rain.
Well, we're getting queued up right now to get started, but some of you have discovered the webinar chat already, so be sure to chime in there if you have any comments you want to engage with other people in the webinar as to what the content that is in the webinar. We also have a designated Q&A button. So if you have any questions during the webinar at any point, please chime in. For those who've been in these past webinars or ever been in a presentation with me, you know that I like to make it a discussion. So I'd love to hear what's going on out there. All right, at the top of the hour, I'm just going to give it 1 minute and then we'll get started.
Simon likes the beats.
I don't know if there are anybody who was supposed to attend ICSC this year or has been attending in the past years, but a highlight of my ICSC trips is always going back to those Vegas clubs. And the type of music they have going on there. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and pause this music. If you want to listen to the music some more, it is a royalty-free playlist on Spotify. I'm doing a plug there. I'm gonna actually have our panelists jump off of our webcam as we get started, and we can all focus on the presentation that we have today. So if you can jump off of webcam, we will see some of you in a few. All right. Great. All right, let's get started. So thank you, viewers, for joining us in this week in social distancing with UberMedia. When we last spoke, Georgia was one of the first states to open up, and now 90% of the country has lifted stay-at-home orders. And many of you have experienced what the new norm is as you dine out at a restaurant or get that first professional haircut after 3.5 months. I'm pointing out professional because during this time I've also become a hairdresser. I would never give myself that title, but I'm thankful that a lot of the salons have opened up in my area. So for the businesses that have survived, recovery is at the center of their mind, and it has been for us too. In the past few weeks, we've shown you how to use mobile data to analyze consumer engagement. And this week, we've launched our Recovery Insights solution. I'm Evelina Jang, Director of Analytics and Data Solutions at UberMedia. Thank you again for joining us in this week's webinar. This series is one piece of our effort to assist researchers, analysts, and the global community in understanding the impact of COVID-19 and social distancing. Please note that this webinar is being recorded, and a link to this recording will be available on our website, ubermedia.com. And as I mentioned right before we had started, as always, questions during the webinar is much appreciated and welcomed. So there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom, in your Zoom taskbar. So if you ask any questions there, we'll either answer it in the chat or during the webinar. So speaking of Q&As, I actually, as we usually do in our webinars, I want to start off with a poll to understand who is in the audience, and that'll help us frame our conversation for today. So let me start this poll off, and I'll give it a few minutes. So which category best describes the industry that you work in? Education, research, government, public administration, healthcare, social assistance, hospitality, travel, tourism, information services, real estate, restaurant, QSR, retail, and if we miss any sectors, please let us know what other sectors you're coming out of, and we'll try to address what our content is with your sector. Got half of the votes in. I'm just going to give it a few more seconds, and I'm going to launch the results of the poll. All right. So I'm going to close the poll at this time and share the results here. Looks like today half of our viewers are from the hospitality, travel, and tourism sector. That's exciting because we do have a shopping center that we're featuring in here that I know is a tourist destination in Atlanta. We also have some from the information services and data processing, as well as some real estate and education. So thank you so much for joining us. I think a lot of the content today is going to be really relevant to all of your sectors. So I will stop sharing the poll now and then we'll get right into it. So today, our panelists include fellow UberMedians. We have Gladys Kong, our CEO, who's joined us today. We also have Kate Myers, our VP of Product, who will be engaging in a discussion with me about what we're seeing in Georgia. And then we have also Connor Baldwin, who is our VP of Strategy, who will be giving us some updates on some of our UberMedia efforts with COVID-19. So before we get into the analysis that we've done using mobile location data to understand the impact of COVID-19, I actually want to give the mic over to Gladys, who has a few words to say to our viewers. So Gladys, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Great. First, I want to welcome everyone to our webinar. We started running these webinars regularly in March when COVID hit. And the main reason was because we felt at the time COVID pretty much stopped us all in our tracks and thrown us into a world that we are unfamiliar with. As a result, we're seeing dramatically different patterns and behavior from people around the world, as habits and activities we deemed normal are forced to change. So for instance, I don't have capable family members like Evelina who could cut my hair, so I just let it grow out. And these days, Instacart and Amazon visit me way more often than my friends and families. So a lot of these dramatic changes are forced on us, and because people's behavior shifted so much, that it prompted us to create insights and metrics that we believe can measure and reflect this new normal to share with our partners, our clients, and our community at large. Our goal has been to provide some timely and relevant information in this uncertain and unpredictable time with everyone to help inform better decision making. So for the past many weeks, we have been sharing data on measuring the impact of COVID. But today we are moving into the recovery phase, sharing insights on reopening as each state, each county starts allowing business to reopen under certain conditions. We're prepared to have this webinar last week, but we postponed it, as some of you have known from our notice, because we felt the timing wasn't right to talk about retail business in malls then. With curfews and lifted and business operating again, we feel better about holding our webinar this week. With a lot of the recent protests, people have approached me and asked me if we would allow our data to be used to track protesters. For those of you who have worked with UberMedia, know that we do not allow our data to be used for certain cases. And to reiterate here, I want to share that with you. We prohibit our data to be used to determine employment, credit, healthcare, or insurance eligibility, or for the purpose of personally identifying individuals or any unlawful tracking or surveillance, or to sell to law enforcement agencies. We take this policy seriously and we stand by it at all times. So I want to share that with you and hope that answers some of your questions before you hear the data we're going to share with you today. Without further ado, I'll turn it back to Evelina to share the content we've prepared for you, which is a lot, and I hope it's interesting and insightful for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Gladys. Yeah, so this week we have a lot of content, as Gladys mentioned, regarding what the impact of the stay-at-home orders are, or the impact of the lift of the stay-at-home orders on across the nation, and specifically also in Georgia. So this week in social distancing, we're going to be using the Recovery Insights solution to understand consumer engagement across the nation. I'm going to begin with introducing a new metric for understanding social distancing and analyzing what that metric looks like across the nation. We'll also head back to Georgia to understand how things have progressed since reopening, with a specific focus on 3 shopping centers. I know at the end of the webinar last time, I got a lot of feedbacks like, I want to know what's going to happen in Georgia. I want to know what's going to happen in Georgia. And so we decided to continue that conversation in today's webinar. So we're going to first look at a nationwide look at what is going on in terms of social engagement and consumer behavior across the nation and within the states. And so before we get started here, and I'm gonna talk about our new metric, our close contact new metric, I actually wanted to hear what's going on in probably outside of Los Angeles for me, because I really have not left the house still. So I'm gonna launch this off and start our first poll here. What is your sense of economic recovery in your local area? So as you'll see in the presentation, most of the country has opened up already. Many states have begun phase opening of their businesses. I know for Los Angeles itself, we're opening up gyms on Friday, movie theaters. Disneyland is opening July 17th. So there's a lot of, we're moving towards recovery and a lot more social activities that are going to be allowed. So I'm curious to hear what your sense of the economic recovery in your local area is. Is there a lot of activity going on? I think yesterday I heard from a coworker that there are lines out the door for some restaurants and the ice cream parlor in O-Town, Pasadena. So let me know what's going on in your state. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Any last minute numbers coming in? And let me share the results here. All right. So what is the sense of economic recovery in your local area? So I had one person that said, or 2% of the viewers are saying that there's lots of activity, people are lined out outside and restaurants. That might be the coworker I was talking to. But it seems like everybody's in the middle here. It seems like there's some activity going on, or in some states there might not be very much activity, things have lifted. But people are still not going out. And then we have some who are like me. I don't really know what's going on outside yet because I haven't really left the house in months. All right, well, let's see what the data shows here. So one of the first metrics that I wanted to introduce here is actually our close contact data set. And so we have been talking in our past webinars about engagement, we're just looking at foot traffic to public places. So we're looking at, are people going to grocery stores? Are we going to non-essentials? Are they going to restaurants or fast food restaurants? And that's one way to measure engagement, and we're definitely going to dive into that. But another way to measure engagement is through looking at how much contact have devices had with each other. So for example, I'm a very social person. My calendar is usually filled up with activities throughout the week, and I play in different sports leagues. And so if you looked at how much contact I'm having in the world or in the community, you'll see that I'm interacting with 40 to 100 people in a week's time, even more than that. But since the pandemic had started, I've pretty much been in my house most of the time, and all the sports activities have stopped, so my interaction has really gone down. So this metric allows us to measure that. And how we measure that is we are looking at the proximity of devices. So we're looking at whether devices are within 5 meters of each other. And then we're looking at how long they're in proximity with each other. So if they are within 5 meters of each other and within at least 5 minutes, then we designate that as a close contact. So we've taken all of the devices that we've seen across the nation, and we've aggregated that data to understand what does social contact look like. And so these are the results of this metric. We looked at a 7-day average of how much interaction there is between devices. And you can see here, pre-pandemic, things are above normal. So 0 measures, 0 is at normalcy, and anything above that is beyond that. And we see that pre-pandemic people are social. When stay-at-home orders were put in and a lot of businesses were closed, non-essentials were closed. I know my gym, my sports leagues were closed down. We saw a dip in social contacts. So this showed us, and it was a verification of our data too, that when these stay-at-home orders were put in, we were seeing a lot less social contact during this time. Now, we're in the recovery phase now, and what we're seeing is that with the lift of stay-at-home orders and the opening of more businesses, we're seeing a jump in social contact. And we have this cat here to, to provide a reaction as to what we're seeing. We're in the last week or so that this data has been run, this is run on a daily basis, we've been seeing a jump in the amount of social contacts, almost to the point above the point of normalcy. So we're seeing some trends that are showing that we're going back to pre-COVID times. Now, as you see on this chart, it's starting to plateau a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see if this graph continues to go up or if it plateaus at a certain point, indicating whether we're in a new norm or whether we can go back to what it was before the pandemic. Now, we also wanted to measure how much people are engaging in social activities. So the first metric indicated that people are going out. And so going out could mean they're going to the park, or they're interacting, they're going to family events, or they're going to social events. Another way to measure engagement is through looking at consumer engagement. And so what we have here is we measured how much are people going to what was previously closed. So our non-essential sectors, such as apparel, entertainment, fitness, salon and spas, hotels. And what we're doing here, and I have these cats here to show that these are the sectors that we're measuring. And what we're doing here is we're looking at how much are people going to these non-essentials. So what we see is that with the Midwest and South, we're seeing more movement towards recovery. So there's a lot more engagement. The darker green indicates that there's a lot more engagement, foot traffic at these non-essential sectors. The top states here are Wyoming, South Carolina, Oklahoma, Missouri. So those in the Midwest and the South. What we're seeing in contrast to that is that the states who were hit hard with the virus and have later stay-at-home orders lifted, they're a lot slower in their recovery. So we have our capital on this. We have California, Washington, Massachusetts. So these states who were hit hard with the pandemic, we're seeing slower recovery. And so when I saw this data, I thought it was interesting. I wanted to understand whether there was a correlation between stay-at-home orders and when they're lifted and people's visits to non-essential sectors. And so I created this graph here that ranked all the states and by how much engagement there is to the non-essentials. And so the higher you are on this graph, the higher you are ranked. And then at the bottom here, we have when your stay-at-home orders were lifted. And so, for example, we had Colorado who lifted their stay-at-home order on April 25th. or we have Nevada, who lifted their stay-at-home order on May 8th. And what we found in graphing this data is that states that had no firm stay-at-home orders, so Wyoming, Oklahoma, South Dakota, North Dakota, and Utah, they did not have firm stay-at-home orders. They closed businesses, but they didn't. The governor didn't institute a stay-at-home order. And what we found is that there is much more activity happening at these states, much more activity to their non-essentials. We also saw that those who were early in their lifts also ramped up in their activity to their non-essentials. So when the orders were lifted, they were going out to the salon and spa. They were going out to do some shopping. What we found that was also interesting was that a state like Nevada, where they had a relatively early lift of their stay-at-home order, so early in May, they lifted early, but I think because their economy is driven by the casino industry, and which didn't open till June 4th, we weren't seeing as much activity to non-essential retailers. And then finally, we saw that with the states that had later stay-at-home orders lifted, or there's no scheduled stay-at-home orders, that there is a low level to non-essentials. Now it looks like I have some questions that have come in, and I'm gonna dive into sector performance because that's a metric that we're always very interested in understanding and understanding. Let's see, some of the questions here I have. Yeah, so this metric, the close contact metric, that first graph that I saw was for all of the United States. So going back here to this graph here, we were understanding the United States and how social contact was happening in the United States. Some of the other questions is this increase, can it be attributed to protesting? That's something that had come to mind when I was analyzing the data. I haven't dug into that because my focus has been on retail, looking at foot traffic to retail businesses. But that could definitely be a reason why we saw that jump. And that's why I'm interested to see while the protests are happening and as we continue, whether this social contact goes up or whether it starts to plateau. The third question we got here is, when you say 0 is normalcy on the graph about close contact, can you expand on that? Is there an average index to 0 over a certain time period, and what time period is that? That's a great question, and that's something I should have started with, actually. So yes, 0 is normalcy, and so all this data, and you'll see the data throughout this presentation, is indexed to pre-COVID-19 times. So we looked at January to February 15th, that's pre-COVID. All right. Thank you so much for those questions. Let me jump over to our sector performance now. Okay, so our sector performance, how's that going? So when we're looking at sector performance, and here are these cats again. Our sector performance is we're looking at QSRs, we're looking at big box. And note that I had a few coworkers look at this presentation before I went out, and many of them didn't catch this asterisk. We know this is not a cat. He is a dog, but we couldn't find anything that looked at big box retail cats, so we came up with our dog here. We also looked at grocery as well as non-essentials such as fitness and entertainment, as you saw before. And so what we see here is that graph. So on the y-axis, we're looking at a 7-day foot traffic index. Again, 0 is normalcy. So we're looking at the performance of these sectors and how it compares to pre-COVID-19 times. And so what we're seeing, and we're only looking at the month of May, since most states were lifting stay-at-home orders during May, so we wanted to see what that trajectory towards recovery looks like. And so we see that when 60% of the states have opened, there's pretty much steady traffic going to each of these sectors. So slight ups and downs, but we haven't seen much of an increase yet. Especially much of an increase yet, except in non-essential, where we're seeing slight increases. But as more of the states had opened, so we look at Memorial Day weekend, where 70% of the states have opened, and we also have a holiday to push us to be more social, we see that these sectors are increasing. So we're getting towards that normalcy again. Now, looking at this time period, the first week of June, we're seeing that 90% of states have opened, and the QSR sector especially has an upward trajectory, as well as our non-essentials, who were pretty much had dropped during stay-at-home orders, has started to increase now. Whereas big box and grocery, we're seeing pretty steady traffic to those sectors. All right, so I'm gonna bring in Kate now, our VP of Product, to talk about our new product, our COVID-19 Recovery Insights. Before I have her jump in here, looks like I got another question. How many, let's look like, it looks like, how many devices were captured for close contact? So Kate, I'm actually gonna bring you in here because you were the lead in getting this data set out. So Kate, do I have you on?
Yep.
Great.
Hello, everyone.
I think this question is speaking directly to our close contact data set, and how many devices did we look at across the nation for close contact?
Sure. So we see about 75% of US households. We don't see every device all the time. So in terms of what percent of close contact events that we see, it's a little hard to absolutely determine that, but it is a very, very large sample size that goes into it.
Yep. And we're seeing, believe 300 million devices in the US, and that's in the last 5 years. So we're definitely seeing a lot of devices that are helping us understand close contact and the close contact metric. All right, Kate, I'm gonna have you jump into our recovery insights here.
Thanks, Ev. We are really excited to announce the launch of our COVID Recovery Insights solution. This solution is designed for retail brands, tourism boards, and researchers in the economic and public policy sector. And the goal here with this product is to provide quantifiable ground truth information to help with critical decision-making during this recovery period. Those decisions might be around supply chain management. They might be around operational decisions, like when you're going to open stores or what hours you're going to maintain or how you might staff. They also might be decisions around real estate portfolios and possibly policy and economic projections in communities. And ultimately, what this product provides is 34 different insights through 2 views. The first view is store level. So this can either be retail locations or it can be points of interest in the case of tourism. And so the data will be specific to those particular places. The second view is market level. That's a geospatial view where we provide insights on communities, and there are different aggregation levels there. That could be census block group, tract, county, state, or as, for example, Evelina had shown a nationwide view. This slide is showing it's actually showing all of the metrics that go into the solution. So all these metrics are available via a store view or a market level view, and give an insight into how people are behaving and how that's changing over time. This data is updated every day, and so you get each of these metrics every day to track change and make projections relative to your business. What we really want to do is show the product in action. And so I'm going to throw it back to Evelina, who's done a comparative study on 3 very different shopping centers in Georgia, which of course was the first state to really actively push forward with a wide opening of their economy. And so Evelina is using the product here to generate a set of insights that she's now going to take you through.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. So what I wanted to do for this webinar is we had the sector views in our last webinar, but I wanted to dive into what's going on at a store level, what's going on at a location level. And so in understanding how these metrics can help businesses, we had picked 3 shopping centers to analyze. And so we picked the Noonan Crossing, which is in a suburban area. It's anchored with a Lowe's and Walmart. We also picked the Ponce City Market, which for me, if I were to visit Atlanta again, would definitely be a tourist destination for me. It has a food hall and a lot of small businesses in it that seem very interesting. And then we also included in this analysis the Shops at Buckhead, which is a high-end designer shopping center with a lot of designer brands. And so as with every analysis that I've done thus far with COVID-19, the first thing I look at is foot traffic. I want to know what's been going on at each of these 3 shopping centers. And so what I have here is our 7-day average of what's going on at these locations. And then I've graphed here Noonan Crossing, which is up here, Ponce City, which is this orange, and then the blue is the Shops at Buckhead. And you'll see that with Ponce City and the Shops at Buckhead, when COVID-19 happened and stay-at-home orders were put in, non-essential businesses were told to close, these 2 shopping centers took a plunge. And took a plunge, and that's because what was at these shopping centers were basically places that were not allowed to open during this time. So we got at the Shops at Buckhead, Jimmy Choo, Hermes. At the Ponce City Market, there was Core Power Yoga. There's the food hall that was there that was only for takeout. What we see though here in this graph is Noonan Crossing is way above these other 2 shopping centers. And I had made mention that in the shopping center is a Walmart and Lowe's. And it's covered here, but this is that normalcy. This is the normalcy line here. And what we saw is as stay-at-home orders were lifted, Noonan Crossing, who was doing relatively well even before the pandemic, started to get towards that road of recovery. They're going quicker towards that road of recovery, whereas Ponce City Market and the Shops at Buckhead are still level doing that climb. Another viewpoint that we could have with this data is also comparing it to state and county level metrics. And so what I have here in this graph is looking at the Shops at Buckhead and comparing it to the state and county level. So what has been how are they, compared to state and county retailers, how is the Shops at Buckhead doing? And so again, with the stay-at-home orders mandated, all retail saw a drop, but as we're going towards recovery, all retail is going up, but is Buckhead keeping up with the state and county retail numbers? And Kate, as we were talking about these graphs and how I'm using this product, I think you had some comments about what you were seeing here.
Yeah, I'll just talk a little bit about the use cases and what we're hearing from our clients and people in this space. Really, retailers are saying, okay, I know what my sales are at my store. You know, maybe I know what the sales are at the Shops at Buckhead, but I don't know how to understand those sales in the larger context because my sales numbers look different than they ever have. And so I'm asking myself, am I doing the best I can during this recovery period? Is this what the new normal looks like? Or could I be doing better? And the way to start to get to that is to compare yourself to the numbers that you're seeing in your geography, the larger geography surrounding you. And Evelyn, I think on your next slide, you're also going to get at this similar question we hear from retailers, but just in a slightly different way, which is understanding how your location is doing against some key sectors. And that's important if you have a shopping center that has an array of types of retail, or your retailer that sells across a few sectors. You can look at these different sectors and really try to understand where you're fitting into the recovery picture.
Yeah, and so when you're looking at the shops at Buckhead, the performance is going up, and it's not near gas stations and grocery stores, which are essential businesses. But with big box, there were some brands in the big box sector that were not allowed to open, and so looking at how those two, the shops at Buckhead compares to big box, is really interesting, because with the shops at Buckhead, we're seeing that they're going towards an upward trajectory, but with big box, their movement, that trend is looking a lot slower than the shops at Buckhead.
Yeah, and just to jump in here as well, Evelina, one of the things that's people are considering right now is, what is there pent-up demand from these past few months? Are we going to see that non-essential retailers are quick out of the gate to recover revenue? And is that going to be sustained growth? And how much higher is it going to go up? Or is the new normal a little bit different? This data is a leading indicator of that. And in addition to understanding how your retail location is fitting in to the picture in your geography, retailers who operate across the country can use early states like Georgia as a bellwether to understand what is going to happen in other regions as they begin to open up, and what kind of growth to anticipate. And it's also interesting for research groups in tourism or economic development who may not have first-party data about sales and consumer activity to get a sense of what kind of consumer confidence and retail and public space engagement they can expect in the coming weeks and months.
Yeah, so it's one thing to look at your sectors and how you're comparing to those sectors. What the recovery solution also includes is looking at your community and how much contact your community is making, how much engagement there is in your community. And so one way to look at this is through our distance from home metrics. And what I have graphed here is in the colored lines, solid lines, we have that foot traffic that you had saw previously. In this dotted line, we're actually looking at community engagement. And what's really interesting here is that Noonan Crossing has gone towards a level of, has gone above normalcy in how much traffic they're getting, but social engagement is continuing to go up. Whereas with the shops at Buckhead, which is more in the city near downtown Atlanta, we're seeing that their traffic is starting to go up, but community engagement hasn't really started to rise. And I thought that was really interesting. And this is really a different tale between what's happening in suburbia and what's happening in the more urban areas. And Kate, I think you also had some comments on this slide as well, right?
Yeah, we've been listening to people across different sectors, in epidemiology and retail and tourism. And one of the biggest question marks out there is understanding and perhaps explaining the difference in what's happening in rural versus suburban versus urban communities. And we've seen that play out because what happened in New York City is not happening in Tampa. What happened in Detroit is not happening in other cities that have a different makeup. And certainly what's happening in urban centers is not the same story we're seeing happen in suburban and rural communities. And there are an awful lot of variables, of course, at play, but these two data sets, which are both included in the recovery solution, can be complementary ways to shine light on what happens in different communities. And this is something that we've heard a lot of our partners really seeking to understand. So you may see that a community is still engaging in the sense of they're getting in their car and driving, and maybe they do live in a rural community. So they still have to go to the feedlot and they still have to do the things that take them outside their home, but they're not necessarily coming in close contact with other people. And they're maybe not doing non-essential purchases, but they are making essential purchases. And so comparing different types of retail locations to different types of behaviors in different communities, you can get a nuanced portrait of what's actually happening as it pertains to tourism or retail in your community or sales tax, etc.
Yeah, so this one looks at how, when people are leaving their home, how much they're traveling. But the next metric I had here, which is the one I introduced today with the close contact metric, this one again looks at, okay, people are leaving their home, but are they interacting with the community? Are they going out to places where there's nobody around them? Or are they engaging in activities where there are plenty of people around them? Maybe they're going out to play sports at the park, or in contrast, they might be going camping where there's nobody around. And so when Kate was speaking about how there could be geographical differences in how consumers engage, that's really seen here in this chart. So again, we are looking at the shops at Buckhead and Ponce City Market. Both are in the city of Atlanta, not too far from downtown, but you can see that contrast, a stark contrast in the amount of contacts that's happening between these two parts of the city. And they're not very far apart from each other. With shops at Buckhead, when we are looking at the average contacts per device, we're seeing an upward trend that's almost going past normalcy into pre-COVID-19 numbers. Whereas Ponce City Market, that area around Ponce City Market, it's going up and down, but it still hasn't gone towards that upward trajectory that we're seeing with the shops at Buckhead. So two areas that are not too far apart from each other, but the amount of engagement in those communities is very, very different.
Yeah, and Ev, we've talked a lot today about the kind of economic considerations. How fast can you expect retail and tourism dollars to start flowing? But another really major area of concern, of course, for all organizations is safety. When I reopen, how safe are my employees going to be? How safe are my customers going to be? What kind of risk are we taking on here? If I'm reopening for tourism, are there certain destinations or points of interest that perhaps we should promote more? And the close contact data set really gets at this consideration, which can be an operational consideration about safety for the community and for businesses and organizations.
Now, I know that there's a lot of new metrics here, and we're actually going to recap what those metrics are. But if there's any questions that you have with what you're seeing right now and what you're seeing with this data, please chime in the Q&A and let's have a discussion about that. Especially if, I would love to hear if there's anybody from Atlanta that can shed some light on these two shopping centers or what's going on there. Actually, as I say that, it looks like we just got a question in. So what does this difference between Buckhead and Ponce tell us? So in this graph, I don't know if there's a specific graph that one of our viewers is referring to. In this graph, what we're showing is the activity of residents of people seen in the area, what their activity looks like. So if you were within 10 census block groups of these shopping centers, then we're measuring what your social contact looks like. How much are you interacting with other people? And so that area around Ponce City Market, we're seeing a lot less interaction in the Ponce City Market area than we are in the Shops at Buckhead area. Kate, anything else to add there?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to note how the two trends diverge around reopening. And what this is saying to me is that the community around the Shops at Buckhead really were maybe a little bit more bullish about opening back up and starting to engage more as compared to the community around Ponce City Market.
Yeah, I think the same viewer asks why. So I think, Kate, you're getting into the why, right? You're getting into, well, there are businesses in the area that are probably opening up more. There maybe the areas around the Shops at Buckhead, there might be areas where there is like parks, places where there is more social engagement. I think that's getting to the why, right?
It is. I would also say that, getting to the why is a complex question that a lot of researchers are looking into. And I think our data can help you identify where you should go look, but why is likely a very complex mix of socioeconomic factors and probably also factors about the physical space itself. You have to consider if people are living in single family homes and socially distancing, and then they socially distance less, the change in how many people they come in contact with is going to increase rapidly. If you're living in a multifamily building, even when you were socially distancing, were being exposed to more people due to the density in the area. And so the change between aggressive social distancing and less aggressive social distancing may be more nuanced, but you may actually continue to socially distance for whatever reason more than perhaps people in a nearby suburb.
Yeah, and this is where that local knowledge really comes in, right? You have your store managers who can tell you what's going on in your area. Like I said, I haven't really been out of the house, so I can't really tell you what's going on, but I have colleagues who live in the city, and they kind of have to go out because of the area they live in and to go buy groceries. So they're seeing what's going on the ground level. And that's where that on the ground knowledge is never going to be replaced by mobile data. Completely replaced. All right, another question we have here is it the case that you also have origin for these devices? Okay, can you speak a little more to that?
Sure. We look at a number of factors with these devices, and so in this particular data set that we're showing, we don't consider the origin. We're considering how often devices are coming in close contact. But in the underlying data, we have a sense of where devices reside and also where they start and end trips. So the short answer is that yes, you can look at origin when using mobility data to do analysis.
Yeah, and that's key in our tourism sector. When we do a lot of analysis there that looks at breakdown of visitor segments.
Right. Yeah. And that'll be a consideration, I think, in tourism. Ev, I think we've both heard that people suspect that tourism will be more local. So the origin markets might be closer to home as in the early phases of recovery before people are really comfortable with perhaps air travel. But yes, looking at the origin at any given time and seeing how that changes is something that's certainly in the data.
All right, I'm going to toss this back to you to give us a sum of what you can get from the recovery insights.
Yeah, I think it's just worth noting that the analysis Evelina just took us through of those shopping centers in Georgia was done using these recovery insights. as I look at the screen, I can say specifically using area covered and some of the sector level trends. And as you can see, there are a number of metrics that can power other studies in different directions. So I just kind of wanted to recap here, show these metrics, and just underscore that they enable a lot of different studies that maybe help people start to get at these questions about why and what's next.
Yep. Yeah, and on top of our recovery solutions, we've really added more links to what we've talked about. We've added more links to what we've talked about today in terms of the use cases. And we've also updated our website to include more of that information. So actually, I'm going to toss this over to Connor to talk us through this. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks, Evelina. Right, so I just wanted to take a little brief pause here and show you guys some of the resources that we have available on the UberMedia website. So if you can jump to the next slide. And so here, for example, at ubermedia.com/COVID-19, you can find both our page on our COVID-19 Recovery Insights product that will kind of run you through everything that's included, sort of some of the basic use cases for it and more. And then we also have our COVID-19 research resources. Those include a lot of different things, but a couple specifically. So we can go to the next slide, please. In those research resources, we have a couple of kind of freebies for you. The first would be a COVID-19 research data directory. So if you're looking for data sources that are out there that can help you study the impact of COVID-19 and social distancing, we've kind of assembled them in one easy to navigate place. And then we also have our COVID-19 research guides. So those are just general guidance for how to use mobile data research. Again, the impact of COVID-19 and social distancing, organized into a few different disciplines like public policy, disease modeling, economic recovery, retail trends, and tourism studies. So if you're in one of those verticals, I would recommend going in there and kind of taking a look around and seeing some of the guides and the recommended data sets to use. And then another final thing I wanted to highlight is our Vista property reports. So those are just a very easy way to get started with mobile data and insights drawn from it. These are just very easy to start and easy to look at reports with 10 different location insights. They're available in just minutes. And I'm also happy to mention that we do have a free trial available. So if you just go on to ubermedia.com/VPR, you can get started and get insights on any place in the US for any time period reaching back 5 years, just a matter of something along the lines of a few minutes so you can get those insights back. So just a couple of the things that I wanted to highlight here and make sure that you all knew where they were. And I would encourage everyone to, once the webinar is over, go over there and check them out.
Yeah, I've been playing a lot with our Vista property reports and doing single site analysis, especially when our clients come in and say, hey, what's going on here? It's been probably one of the most fun tools I've used thus far with the Vista property reports.
Yeah, I think it's got some great use cases for COVID-19 in particular, where you can run one report for location for a pre-COVID period of time, and then run another report for the same location with a post-COVID period of time. And then you get this really great look at kind of what happened between the two periods of time and how COVID-19 and social distancing affected a particular property or geographic area.
Yes. All right, thank you, Connor, for that overview. I can't believe we're at the end of the hour already, so I'm gonna wrap things up. If during this time you have any other questions about the presentation as I do our concluding thoughts here, please chime in there and we'll get those answered. I know there's a lot of new stuff today, but I think what we're still looking at are trends and comparing pre-pandemic time to during stay-at-home orders to this recovery time period. We've kind of come full circle during these last 3 months. So with what we saw today, I think as across the nation, what we're seeing is that there is an increase in consumer engagement. But I think what's on top of everybody's mind right now is to see if we're going to see as much engagement as we did during our pre-COVID-19 times, or if we're in a new norm where places that used to be completely packed because of the capacity limits, we don't see them get as high in terms of their foot traffic as they used to. So it'll be interesting to see what those numbers look like as we continue towards the recovery phase. Some of the new data that I got to play with was around social engagement and social contacts. And I think that added another layer to my analysis as I was trying to understand what was going on at these shopping centers. As I knew that these shopping centers were opening up, there is traffic going on, but I was wondering, is the trend that they have normal, going towards a recovery phase, or if it's not moving as fast as other businesses? So to be able to compare it to other economic sectors was insightful, and also to be able to measure it against what's going on in the community was also very interesting, especially when we were able to see that stark contrast between two shopping centers that are in the city but in different parts of the city. And that really gave us some insight as to how much more people are socially engaging and interacting with people around them. Now with that, I'm going to wrap up our webinar today. I'm going to give it a few more, one more second, see if there's any other questions that come through for this webinar. Let me check our Q&A here. It looks like I have a question here that looks at, talks to our previous charts. And are the zero the same for both areas, or the zero for Ponce City is different for the zero for shops at Buckhead? So what we wanted to do, what we did is we actually created an index. So the zero is normalcy for across all the locations. In creating this index and comparing all of their activity to pre-COVID-19 times, we're able to put all of these locations on a level playing field and understanding what their recovery looks like. So zero is the same for those two shopping centers. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us this week in social distancing. If you have any other questions or would like to learn more about the products that we showed today, please be sure to reach us at contact@ubermedia.com, or you can reach out to your UberMedia representative, as well as our ubermedia.com website. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'll talk to everybody soon.